Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mist podcast. I am going to be talking about fractals. Now, I think we all understand the geometric fractals that many people are familiar with. Some people are not actually familiar with fractals. So go to YouTube if you're not familiar with fractals and just type in geometry fractals or fractal psychedelic experience, something around fractals. You'll find it. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Basically, where one shape, you start with, like, for instance, a triangle, and that one triangle disperses into an infinite amount of more triangles, or even other shapes, other geometry, etc. There's some form of geometry happening whenever you're enveloped in fractals. Now, we are geometrical beings and geometrical entities, from an energetic point to the physical point that we're in the physical body, right? And that's just a very plaintive thing of, like, we created the understanding of the inch to the foot based off of the part between your two knuckles on your finger, to creating the mile based out of the average adult human's foot, and that is making up the mile. And then, that goes into how geometry has unfolded and what we've uncovered in, like, the pyramids, how they were able to measure the distance from the planet to the sun, all these other things, right? Making all these astronomical measurements basically completely curated based out of us as humans, what we're capable of doing, what we're able to do, which is just literally existing and having the embedded information in our entire, lower density there. I say lower density as in your third dimensional form, having these specific geometrical affiliations to other things that are completely outside of what you would say before you start imposing spiritual things and how energy is consistent everywhere. It has nothing to do with you, but then starts to realize that everything has everything to do with you in a whole different way, and nothing to do with the things that you think, but everything else, because this is, and I'm going to get into the understanding of fractals to explain this a lot better. Now, everything in existence is happening at the same time. Time is an illusion. Everything's happening at once. And so perception itself and observation means that you are looking at, as if you were putting it on paper, like the dot is looking at in a specific way. You only have so much of a field of vision with your eyes, right? Well, what you experience with your eyes geometrically, music is the geometry of the ears. So putting in perspective your consciousness and what you evaluate, what you observe, everything has an observation of geometry, and everything has an observation of fractals, right? Essentially, because you are seeing the fractalization of one single point going into all of its infinite possibilities. And this is just because of understanding that everything is correlated. If you really sat there and you dug down into, prospecting all the things in your existence, you would find so many layovers and you would find so many integratable things that it would almost become very hard to find a distinction between what is and what is not related to what else. That line can be very fucking long, and those reasons can be infinite. But this is how fractals work, right? And so if you are also a geometrical bound entity underneath the capability of fractals and what fractals do, then that means whatever you observe is, like, going to completely fractalize itself out into your observation and what you end up perceiving, and that is going to come right back into your existence, and you're going to have the full fulfillment of knowing what's going on. And when you start paying attention, that's when you start seeing the fractals. The thing about fractals itself and seeing patterns, right? That's the expansion of consciousness, is being able to see more than what you usually are seeing, right? So if you can see more patterns, more geometrical shapes, if you can think of more possibilities, if you can expand, then you will eventually be able to see the fractals, and then you will be able to understand why and how things are starting to, like, build themselves inside of your own reality. Because the whole temporal point of fractals is that it's going to build your reality regardless of what you do, right? This is just inherent. You start with one, if you start in one area of something, you're just going to see all of the facets of that one area. For instance, if you deprecate yourself, if you have a self-deprecating mind, and your mind is working off of that, then you're going to then see how everything in your existence will play out to be self-deprecational. How every single tailoring of your existence is going to tailor around what you are already saying that you are, but really is just the current point of you saying your observation of yourself based upon something, because you can have the choice to change if you choose to at any given point in your existence. Remember that everything in your existence is a choice, and when you wake up to that, you will start seeing the truth. Anyway, is then to come into the realization that the fractals you're observing, if you want to change that, then you have to completely flop around how you're even perceiving it or what you're looking at in general. Which is that if I'm only seeing the negative, then it's only going to fractalize all that negative in every single type of way, and whatever negative poses into other types of fractals. So it's like, if I could put something in that first triangle before the triangle starts to disperse, right? And I could say that that's one thing. If I could say it's money, right? Or abundance, whatever. And then everything outside of the frame of that fractal is going to be only things around that, and that could be every single thing in your existence, from the experience to the emotional feeling to the connotation in your mind thoughtfully of how you're going to put together, right? Like you could say something to somebody and the way that they put it inside of their head could be different than you in an entirely different way. You know, they could do it in a creational way, in a destructive way, in I'm going to live in the same world with you type of way, and I see exactly what your perspective is, but maybe I have a slightly altered one. Like every single type of frame that you could go on with that. So if every single thing is fractals, right, just understanding that everything is fractals, then once you begin to be aware of the fractionalization of your existence is when you will then start to understand all of its compartments a little bit deeper. Now, when I talk about understanding its compartments a little deeper, is that when you're trying to find the truth, and not everybody is looking for answers or the truth or to understand more, and that's why this conversation probably isn't for you. But if you are wanting to find a bigger grasp on understanding what you are experiencing, and then how to frame that a little bit more on understanding how things begin to correlate, is understanding that it correlates in fractals. It correlates in, if I'm looking this way, and it's like you could say you start here and then it starts to expand outwardly, almost as if like you have a dot, and that dot is like looking somewhere, and if that makes any sense. So it looks like a baseball field almost, if you think about it, right? You have the very end point, and then as you look outward, there's this like frame of vision that you have. Unironic how that's a good example, but so that's everything that you are. Now, if you look at on a different field, then it looks different, and all these other things, then now you begin to observe maybe even the same thing, but from a slightly separate-esque point of view. And this is going to give you an entirely different altercation on how you're going to perceive and understand the world you're looking at, even if it has a slight differential than what you were at before. So if one baseball field looking at it is going to be just the vastness of self-deprecation, but let's say you're also in the awareness of healing, well, now you have to step on a new field, and you have to incorporate, like, I'm aware of what this is now, and bringing that awareness means that I'm also incorporating the healing part of coming out of that. And this is where some people get unironically stuck within fractals, is that realizing you have to keep jumping from the expansion of your observation to understand how to break the cycle. And if there's nothing that becomes valid in your experience or within your inheritance to consciously perceiving this world, then you won't break away from anything that you are and what you want to be. And if you start to, once again, look at that in fractals, you look at yourself in fractals, and you look where things, how things started with how you picked up this from somebody, and this became, because in the beginning of all of our lives, we were nothing but sponges. So when you look at the fractionalization of the information that you have been given, then it's just like taking a canvas on a clean slate and throwing a very, very heavy dot of paint on it and letting it go down and just seeing how that happens. And sometimes the wind blows this way and sometimes it blows that way, and you never really know what pattern you're going to have at the end of it, because energy is not necessarily fragile, but almost chaotically and also structurally sporadic, meaning that it's just kind of like your brain in any sense. Like, go look at a tree when it has no leaves on it, kind of like that. It's just like there's no real concrete depiction as to why this tree was growing exactly in every single little type of way that it was growing, but it had certain parts of its fractional existence that it has to accomplish. And so it finding ways to do that, it created its own separate point of geometry, meaning it created its own energy signature, it created its own essence for how it's garnishing and gathering and accomplishing its said thing. And so that could also go into, if that tree got hit by lightning and it's still alive and it's going, you kind of see where this goes, right? One thing leads into another and you end up being able to perceive the fractionalization of the existence. Now, once you can perceive the fractal though, and you can be aware of what's in the fractal, it's then zooming out a little bit and looking in the depth to say, okay, I was in the pyramid observing through the fractal, and I was living inside of that fractal. Now, how do I step backward, zoom out, and go zoom into something else? And to do that, essentially, is to completely break your frame of mind. And doing this is almost like connotationally breaking the whole fractal point of your ego, because then you have to rebuild reality. You're building a restructural understanding. And so if you are looking for a restructural understanding, then you have to begin to understand that everything in that new understanding has to be different. Every single thing about it. The way that you're thinking, the way that you're doing things, every part of you that makes you either has to somewhat transform and evolve, right? Like it has to go from one thing and become, the creation of evolutionized point of that, or there's also the backward side of that where some people end up growing back into destruction to create creation, and creation, destruction, you kind of have this, but saying that is a dignified thing and saying that anything is dignified in itself is really not accurate, because everything that you have in your experience is only because you say it's what it is. And me saying that fractals are a thing is basically just me understanding the observation of what I've experienced. And there are many that probably can empathize with, if they paid attention, they could see something, but they might not even call it fractals. They might call it habits, repetitions. There's a lot of metaphorical ways you could prose this, but all of those different definitions are going to lead to a different conclusion. They're going to lead you down an entirely different perspective, but they almost technically mean the same thing. And this is why we talk about, and why I'm bringing up the conversation of fractals, is because you have to begin to find your understanding within this universe of what you can observe just from looking, just from existing. That's really the big whole premonition behind it, is that you can literally just look. And if you pay attention and you try to understand the meaning behind it, then you start to understand that everything has meaning, because everything is information. Regardless of what anybody ever can say, information is everywhere. And so then the only difference between that and you is your interpretation to the information, and then the processing of what your interpretation of that information is. And that's when you start to build reality, and that's the building and frame of reality, because you've been doing that unconsciously ever since you came into this world, as we all have. So now it's coming back full circle into, how do we understand ourselves? How do we change ourselves if we want to change or do anything? How do we even understand that this is a choice, that everything that we embody now is a choice, and we may feel enslaved to it, but it's only because you are and have always, we all have always taken in information, and then the only difference then is what we do with that information. And some people just don't know. And if you just don't know, then you're not going to do anything differently, right? You're just going to do what you know is correct, or what you think is correct. And I think this is a conversation to bring up, to just let yourself sit down. If you choose to, sit down with yourself and truly ask yourself, are the things that I know real? Is that just, did I listen to someone and they told me that and I just believed it? What is real to me? And that is a part of being aware of this fractalization in your universe, is that you are the observer of everything you can observe, intake, outtake, and you are a computer. You're processing, you're going through information, you're sifting through some of it, and some of it matters, some of it doesn't. You unconsciously put blocks into your existence at one point, or you didn't put blocks in, and you remember it all, or you don't remember everything. You remember some things, but your senses have always absorbed and garnished everything. All you did was become a filtration system And then after being a filtration system, you then become the regurgitation system of whatever it is that is going on or has gone on or whatever. And so unless you break into being aware of that, then you're, and I guess that's the whole point of this conversation, is for whoever is aware or is at the point of trying to find their answers, because energy manifesting in itself is bringing the energy to you. If you're trying to heal, you're trying to whatever, then this conversation is just going to come in front of you, because that's the whole point of it. Is like, the truth is always there, and those who seek it shall obtain it in one way or another. But the biggest point of obtaining that truth, of seeing the fractals inside of your existence, is being able to understand what actually is what is, and not let the monkey part of our brain, the limbic part of our brain more specifically, right? The animalistic part of our existence, the humanistic point of our existence, take us away from understanding what's actually there. Because the human brain itself, in its emotional bias and all of the other biases that it can have, likes to delusionize reality to you, because it goes off of comfortability, familiarity, and that is what is technically adhering to what's in those realms of your body, which is your survival instincts, right? And so if we get the emotions completely out of the way, and we start looking only logically, and we only keep it at a logical point, then now we begin to observe anyway. Because with emotions, you're already seeing through a distorted lens, no matter what you do. That lens will be completely offset, distorted, and will be nothing like what actually is there. Because you could even believe something passionately with your emotions and think that that's factual, and still it's just not. And so another point of observing the fractals themselves is like, maybe you have to reimagine your idea of what being kind is, right? And what kindness actually is. And maybe in that is when you actually discover all the fractal part of your existence where kindness was or was not embedded there, and what actually was or wasn't. And then, you figure out the trail. The fractal basically is the trail. The fractal is the understanding. If you don't want to step into the fractal, you're not going to see it. If you don't want to see, then you never will see. If you want to choose to be blind, everything in your existence will be a part of your choices. And maybe those choices are already predeterminedly predicated by your energy signature when you first came into the universe, because everything is happening all for a reason. But is it because of chaotic formed reason, or is it because of pure, like, this exactly was meant to happen because that's just a part of it? And it's just like, well, then what is the actual objective goal on the top of it? And that's just it. There's nothing. So it's almost chaotically structured, but still not, it's not even chaos because it's not chaotically structured. It's structured purposefully. There's meaning. It's always there. But it's just dignifying the pros between the two. And this still can have a very intricate observation if you take it, but the blanket of it is that everything has information. And the only difference between seeing the information is how you are going to take it in. And if you can handle, if your spirit can handle taking it in as pure as it is. Because if your spirit can't handle some things, then it's not going to do it. And that's why some people get stuck. That's why some people don't see these things. Or you might have noticed that there's a lot of people, if you're listening to this, that are not on par with your thoughts and your ideas. And maybe there are some people, but it's not a lot. And there's a reason, because there are many people that are still just living as animals, and that's because many of them were treated as animals through their existence. I mean, they feed most like cattle. You go to school and all that kind of stuff, you're getting treated like cattle. So at the end of the day, when you really break all of it down, unless you broke away from the frame of knowing your spirit was just inherently going to be meant for something outside of that, then you're going to get intertwined into whatever the universe blows you through, essentially. And that state of flow, although people resist it, your resistance is a part of the flow of the state in your existence, because it all has meaning. So just remember to be aware of the fractals of your existence, and be aware that fractals are everywhere, and they are infinite, they are forever. And this is the same reason why you are a multidimensional being, because you being able to think of all these possibilities and being able to understand, facilitate, fabricate, and expand on whatever the hell is going on in your existence is the entire part of you being a multidimensional entity. And that you are not just material, but you are also multidimensional, and that everything in your experience is a part of your choice. We all chose this experience at the end of the day, even the harsh ones. But it's just, is anybody, I say anybody, are many people going to be able to sit there and realize, because it's almost like taking full accountability for your entire existence alone. Because then you realize, if you start taking into the spiritual portion and understanding, if you choose to understand, then this will make sense, where you begin to break into realizing that everything has purpose, meaning, something behind it. And if we then not take it to heart, but take it to logic, and take it to logical heart, where we really try to dissect it effectively, then you're going to finally figure it out and you'll see it. You'll see it all. But if you didn't know it was there, then it's hard to know that that's what was going on in the first place. That's why I'm talking about the fractals, because if you are trying to find the associative way as to why you see patterns for any reason, then this is why. And you already are a repetitional point of patterns. That's, your cells are patternizing themselves to work. Everything about you is already patternized in itself. You have habits, and those habits make your personality. You are what you think about, what you talk about, whatever. And that's the crazy part about fractals. It's you could take one scope and we could, you could go there and you could just dive in. You could go every single part of that scoped fractal, and then it could take you into you know what I mean? But there's a gate for some people that they won't go through, and some people are, they tread past the gate and they're kind of oh. If you truly want to see, then you have to just be courageous and put yourself into nature's hands and walk forward. You have to figure it out, find out. Because no one will be able to build for you what you have to actually build for yourself by having this observation, this realization, this awakening, this prose into whatever part of your existence it is, and whatever evolution or transformation that we have. No matter what you do, if you truly seek, it will come. If you feel it, it will be your existence. And if you want to be able to see more, then pay attention, because it's all right in front of your face. Every single thing that you could ever want to know about why or what. It's just finally putting together the puzzle pieces of a puzzle that you probably didn't even know existed until you started finally, doing what you might need to for yourself. Share this with somebody that needs to know what fractals are. Thank you so much for listening. I am Aeromist, and this is the Mist Podcast.